What happens when you are buried alive? Well, we will find out in this video. I have researched a little and found some interesting stuff. Let's see how we can align that with our character Paul and see how we get out of there. Paul wakes up in a confined and dark space. He can barely move, his hands are tied and he is gagged up. This tells us that he was buried purposely and probably by someone that doesn't like him very much. We can also assume that he wasn't buried too long ago neither. That is important to know, as we will come to see. You see, the space in a modern day coffin encapsulates around 886 liters. If we subtract the average space of a human body, we will get roughly 820 liters of air supply. This would give us approximately 5 hours of air. But if we were unconscious for God knows how long, we have no idea how long we've been already breathing that limited air. So we gotta keep this in mind. Our character starts out well. He tries to orient himself and finds a Zippo in his pocket and is able to visually analyze the space he sits in. That's a wonderful advantage. With this, he's able to cut through the fabric tying up his hands with one of the screws peeking out of the wood. The first big challenge you will face is calming yourself down. An untrained mind will keep on distracting you. It will be busy trying to convince you that you are as good as dead. These thoughts will invite fear. In fact, they will invite the most intense fear you've ever experienced. You will start to breathe heavily and quickly, using much more oxygen than necessary, which ironically leads you to an even sooner death. So staying calm is of importance here. Not only will it literally double your lifespan, but it will also allow you to think more clearly. And yes, it does matter. I've said it many times in previous videos, but mindfulness meditation in this situation is invaluable, especially when we are talking about your last moments of life. But in this video, we don't try to die in peace, we try to escape and get the hell out of there. So air supply will be enough for a few hours. We have light, and by now we have already freed our hands. And what is this? God bless the Lord. That's sort of like finding your future wife on Tinder. Chances are very low. Boom, you got a phone. What now? Check the connection, of course. But we must consider we are buried around 3 to 6 feet deep, right? That means connection could exist, but it doesn't necessarily have to. And if it does, it's probably pretty unstable. In our case here, Paul has connection and is able to dial back home. We furthermore find out that he is in an Arabic-speaking country, namely Iraq. That doesn't really help the situation, but I guess it is what it is. He has not calmed himself down yet and is increasingly agitated. That's a lethal mistake. Not only is he consuming oxygen like a horny bull, but he also won't be able to convince anyone he calls. If he were collected and calm, he could explain thoroughly and gain the officer's trust. Officers are usually trained to determine whether a phone call is real or fake, and by all means, it is impossible for you to not sound honest in this situation. Walk them through, let them know the state of the phone's battery, beg for help in a calm manner. Back in 2010, there were still many US troops stationed in Iraq. That's a benefit. Your phone can easily be located through the nearest tower with which your phone is connected. And considering the 3 battery bars on this vintage phone, we can assume that we have hours left using this device. So hang tight, this could be your way out, but you gotta manage your emotions. Now, tracing back a phone is quite simple. The FBI or whoever you're talking to would contact your mobile carrier, which then traces back your phone by analyzing the signals coming from your phone. Usually your phone transmits data to the nearest cell phone tower. Through this tower, they can determine your approximate location, as you can imagine. However, using only one tower is pretty inaccurate. And that is where cell phone triangulation comes into play. Basically the method of using multiple towers around you to calculate your position more accurately. To do that, they measure the time it takes for your phone to receive signals that were sent from multiple towers around you. Obviously, it takes longer for your phone to receive signals from more distant towers, and thus it is possible to figure out your position by calculating the time the signals take to arrive at your phone. This doesn't take long, but considering that you're in Iraq, the FBI would need to contact the local US embassy, which then again connects to a local high official who then initiates the action on your carrier's side. The United States seem pretty efficient in things like this. I can imagine troops actively looking for you within 2 hours. Even if we assume that it would take 3 hours, your available oxygen will probably suffice. That is, if you stop breathing like a freak. It's just too bad Paul can't chill. I mean, I get why you would freak out, but then again, how about freaking out first and then place a call? Paul failed convincing the FBI. However that is possible, I don't know. But he found another number on his phone, which by the way isn't his. When he calls, a rough voice with a strong accent replies. He tells Paul he would let him out if his embassy made a transaction of 5 million USD by 9 p.m. today. In a scene before, we could see that it is currently just past 6 p.m. This is a chance to negotiate. If I were Paul, I would convincingly tell my kidnapper that I had a close friend working at the embassy and that $5 million would not be a problem. Out of experience, I would say the embassy will only send the money if they received reassurance of my well-being. The obvious goal is to get out of this box first. I would explain that if I died in here, he would not receive any money for sure, so it's a definitive loss. But if he let me out, showed the embassy that I'm still alive, he would certainly have the chance to receive the money. It's a potential win. To strengthen my point, I would add that if he didn't receive any money by 9 p.m., he could shoot me. If he agreed, I would tell him that I will contact the embassy and dial him back in a moment. Afterwards, I would call the FBI, let me be connected to the local US embassy, explain the situation, and try to be located through the triangulation method I have explained before. 9 p.m. leaves us around 2 hours and 30 minutes for anyone to intervene and free us. Paul hasn't done any of that, of course, but there are multiple interesting things that happen next. Let me make clear that by now Paul has called the FBI, a US-based police department, plus a friend of his, and he has failed all 3 times. That is incredible. At this point, I just want to continue enjoy watching him insulting people while slowly wasting his oxygen. I didn't know you could make an entertaining movie with just one handsome dude being stuck in a dark box with a Zippo and a cell phone using incredible profanity that I unfortunately have to cut out. Well, this movie is pretty darn good, and by looking at the next scene, it seems like Paul didn't fail completely.
Paul, I was informed of what's going on. I want you to know that we're already working on trying to get you out of there.
That's a ray of hope. This would boost my confidence. What I would do next, if I haven't already done that, would be to do anything to assist my operator. Then our operator tells Paul, for example, to turn off vibration mode to conserve battery life. At the same time, he tells him to give him his kidnapper's phone number so they can locate him instead. Apparently, locating our phone is a bit tricky because it goes over a carrier in Egypt. But if they can't find the kidnapper, they will most likely be able to find us too, right? But just when I thought things would change, Paul finds a bag underneath his legs. At this point, I was a bit confused. Why didn't he find this bag a bit earlier? I mean, this is not a big space. This is confusing, Paul. Because if you find yourself in an unknown place, the first thing you should always do is get to know the environment. In this bag, he finds a lamp, a glowing stick, and a knife. You really would have wanted to find it early on, right? All those things would boost my confidence. It's just reassuring to not have to worry about light. I mean, burning up your Zippo for light uses a lot of oxygen, and you don't really have much, Paul. Another insane thing that Paul hasn't paid any attention to is the bottle of anti-anxiety pills that were in his pockets too. He had them since the beginning, yet for some reason didn't use any of them. With these pills, he could have drastically slowed down his breathing starting an hour ago. And let's not talk about the anti-anxiety effect of anti-anxiety pills. If he popped a couple, he would have never shouted at the FBI operator at the beginning. He could have easily arrived at the point where he is now over 45 minutes ago. But anyway, let's talk about something fun for a second, okay? Would it be possible to actually break through the casket and free ourselves? There are a few interesting points I have found. At this point, we have a knife, right? The casket, as we have seen so far, is only a cheap provisional wooden box made out of cheap and dry wooden bars. We should be able to break through it. The question is, how would the soil react? I mean, since we got buried just recently, we can assume that the soil covering us is pretty loose. That is good and bad at the same time. Good insofar that it would make it easier to dig through as opposed to wet and heavy soil. But the bad thing is, it would enter our casket at a tremendous speed. So, can we get out of here? Well, let's have a look. In an older episode of Mythbusters, the team tried to escape being buried alive. They were able to escape being buried under 2 feet of dirt. We can assume that Paul, with a bit of luck, would also be able to escape if he was also only covered by 2 feet of dirt, which is a possibility. I think the intriguing part about this clip is how the dirt enters the coffin. We can see that the surface only collapses on the side where the hole has been made. That's an advantage that we should exploit as well. I would try to make a decent hole just below my chin. I would try to control the dirt entering as much as I can and then push all the dirt down to my feet. What I'm trying to do here is let as much dirt into the casket as possible so that there is less above me. The best case would be to establish a tunnel reaching up to the surface, just as we have seen in the Mythbuster episode. However, even if we can't establish a tunnel, we are able to take away quite a bit of dirt above us with this method. Remember how I said in the beginning that our coffin holds around 800 liters? If we are talking about filling up just 25% of the casket with pure dirt, we can literally reshift 200 liters of dirt above us, and that's quite an advantage. This would take time, but it's not like we have anything better to do, right? So the goal is to eventually widen the hole so much that we can almost sit up with our heads peeking through. Now this has to be done quickly and with a lot of force, as dirt will keep on raining on us. Therefore, I would take off my shirt, put it over my head, and thus create an air tissue between my face and the pouring dirt. Then I would wiggle around like a worm, push myself up with my hands, and try to get up to the surface as quick and controlled as possible. I think if buried with only 2 to maybe 3 feet of dirt, this might actually work. If it is more than that, I'm afraid there is probably no way to escape. So perhaps you use your lighter or your knife for a different purpose. In a later scene, however, we can even see a snake entering Paul's temporary home. I first thought he was hallucinating, but I guess this was real. If anyone knows what type of snake this is, please let me know in the comments. I wonder if she's poisonous as well, and if so, what are the symptoms of being bitten? I assume it's probably as shitty as suffocating in a pool of dirt, but you let me know. However, a snake entering from the side of our casket implies that we can't be too deep underneath the ground, right? Upon my research, I haven't really found evidence for snakes burying themselves deeply. Either this one is special, in which case you can and probably will let me know in the comment section, or we aren't buried as deep as we think we are. Now, after successfully alienating the snake, Paul goes back and forth calling his kidnapper, the rescue operator Dan, and his friends back home. His time is running out and he has not yet made a big attempt to get out of there, apart from dialing out for help. Now granted, okay, external help was and still is the biggest chance to survive here. However, there is a time when you gotta make a decision. So if I were Paul here, I would have conserved my phone battery and only connected with Dan, my operator. I would have taken my anti-anxiety pills to slow down my breathing and engaged in mindful meditation as much as possible. I would have given the phone number of my kidnapper to Dan as well, something Paul has only done way too late into the movie. I still think being located and rescued is the best option to survive this situation. Another awkward thing was that at one point Paul's environment was bombarded by an airstrike. His coffin got completely shaken through. Through the damage, several holes have been created inside his coffin, and this resulted in lots of sand pouring in rapidly. This also suggests that he wasn't buried all too deep. Paul here even heard a prayer of a mosque just prior to the impact, and being buried underneath layers upon layers of dirt, I don't think you're able to hear anything apart from your own heartbeat and fading breath. The point that I'm trying to make here is that the snake, the damage caused by the impact, as well as being able to hear voices all suggest that we were not buried all too deep and that an escape was possible. But even if we assume that we were able to escape this coffin, it seems like the kidnappers were waiting above all along, meaning we would have been taken out as soon as we got there, at least most likely. But if I had to choose between slowly suffocating in a dark box, drowning in dirt, or being just shot dead above ground, I would pick the latter any time. You see, watching this movie and thinking about ways to escape led me to conclude that he could have escaped by himself. I think he legit had the chance to escape with the method I have shared before, especially having tools at hand like a knife and a light source. What would happen if he made it up above remains in question, but considering that not escaping the coffin would end in a sure death, making a move would have been preferable. Even though he tragically died in the end, he could and perhaps should have at least attempted to get out of there. I know this is easier said than done, so what do you think? Is there a chance to survive? Did he make a stupid mistake, and how would you proceed if you suddenly woke up tomorrow morning being buried alive? Let me know in the comments, and as always, I am so grateful that you made it this far. Thanks for being here, and I catch you in the next one.